Madhu, you can start whenever it's all ready.
Okay. Harihi Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Yo Antaha Pravishya Mama Vacha Imam Prashuptam Sanjeevayati Akhila Shaktidhara Swadamna Nyamshta Hastacharana Shravanatvagadin Pranan Namo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam Lasatu Shrimadananda Tirtendurno Hridambare Yadvachaschandrika Swanta Santapam Vinikrintati Padavakya Pramanagnan Pranamya Shirasa Gurun Vyakarishe Yata Bhotam Vishnu Tattva Vinirnayam. So good evening everyone. So we are into the fifth chapter. We are into the fifth session of Katha Upanishad. The previous slide was a slight typo there, but today we are doing the fifth lecture of Katha Upanishad. So we can pat ourselves in the back because we are almost coming to the end of the first Valli of Katha Upanishad. And as you know, Katha Upanishad, part of the Krishna Yajur Veda, and it has got two adhyayas. So it has got two adhyayas, and in each adhyaya there are three vallis. Three vallis in the first adhyaya, three vallis in the second adhyaya. So where we are at this point of time, so it has taken us a good 5 sessions or 4 sessions to reach this point where we are coming to the later portions of the first valli. Now, I have summarized in this slide all the verses that we have done before. Okay, so just want to go through the last class. What did we do? Lokadimagnim tamuvacha tatsmai ya ishtakaha yavatirva yatava. Okay, so this is where we did. Okay, and then after he discussed this, he comes to Nachiketa Tripiretya Sandhyam Trikarmakrit Tarati Janma Mrityuhu. So these two verses, so this particular verse and this verse we spent in great detail. So now we are going to make progress with regards to what is it that conversation between Yama and Nachiketa happened about this Agni. Yeah, and you are all now experts on this Agni. So I'm just going to very briefly pause here and get folks to think about, let's revise. And I want you to contribute about this, the great number 360. What is the significance of the number 360? And when Nachiketa said, Swargyam Yagnim, and when Yama said, this is 3 types of yajnas, Kunda, Pinda, and Kala. And we discussed a lot about what is the significance of 360. So I would want one of you to take up very briefly and give a 2d4s of what the 360 of Kunda is, what is the 360 of Pinda, and what is the 360 of Kala. So who wants to take this, please? Will I pick somebody, or do you want to just
Yeah, Madhu, I heard, I mean, maybe I was not in the class fully last week, but I heard that there is if you live for 100 years, 72,000 days and nights, that 360 into 100.
Yeah, so that is about
times 2. Yeah.
So that is about Kala. So the significance of 360 in Kala. What about in Pinda? What is the number 360 in Pinda that we have to think about? Who is going to take that one?
Bones, it is 360 bones.
Yeah, well done.
360 bricks, 360 days.
Yeah, excellent.
Bones, bricks, and days.
Yeah, bones, bricks, and days. Very good. So those are the 360 numbers. So we use our body, and our body contemplate as the bricks in the body as 360 bones, 360 marrows, or 360 joints. And then we do our surrender of activities, both internal activities and external activities. External activities could be the Kunda, where there are the 360 bricks. And then the 360 days of your life times 100 years, every day of your life, you do your activities as a surrender to the Supreme, is the philosophy there. When Yama talks about this, the complete surrender is the key philosophical concept there. 360 and complete surrender. How do you surrender? You don't pick up a novel and then understand how to surrender. No, you have an instruction manual. And the instruction manual for the practitioners of the Sanatana Dharma is the Vedas. So Vedas give you the instruction manual as to how you surrender as long as you are alive, as long as you have the sadhana sharira. How do you do that surrender? So with that surrender, you conduct your life. Then Yama says, Tarati Janma Mrutyuhu, that this person who does this crosses Janma and Mrityu, life and birth, life and birth. So that cycle, as you know, is what we call samsara. So the person who does this, Trinachiketaha Tribiretya Sandhim Trikarmakrit Tarati Janma Mrutyuhu. And last week we had a very interesting session on what the Trikarma is, Yajna, Dana and Tapaha, and how Krishna explained that Yajna, Dana, Tapaha in chapter 17 and chapter 18 of the Bhagavad Gita. You have to take that on board and understand what is it that Trikarma Krit that Yama is talking about in Katha Upanishad. So this is where we stopped last week. So moving on. So Trikarma Krit alone is not sufficient for liberation. So if we just say, look, I will do a lot of charity, I will be good to everyone, I would be pleasant, and I will, be nice to people, and I will lead a very, very decent life. So is that all enough? Is that just leading a decent life? Is this enough for us to get ourselves removed from the shackles of samsara? Yeah, we need to think about this one. Karma alone can never be liberating, and that is very clear. Karma alone is not liberating. Okay, although he said, Yama said Trikarma Krit, but karma alone is not liberating. So what else is required in this equation? So that equation that can be completed only when we know about this Brahman, about this God who is behind everything. So to remind us of this really important concept, Yama immediately says, Trikarmakrit tarati janma mrutyuhu, and then he says, Brahma jagnyam devamediam viditva nichayam imam shantim atyantameti. So these words are very important. So as usual, in our spirit of studying the Upanishads, we are not going to be skimming the surface. We are going to dive deep into these every word and look at the etymology of these words and understand what is it that Yama is telling us here. So let us look at this word, Brahma Jagnam. Okay, so when you look at Brahma Jagnam, it just says, oh, some sacrifice of Brahman. No, it is not that. Let us split it open. Brahma Jagnam is divided into Brahmaja and Jnam. Yeah, Brahmaja is divided into two, Brahma and Ja. Okay, Brahma. So when you take the word Brahma, who is going to tell us here what are all the various meanings of Brahma? And we have done this on a number of occasions here. So what does the word Brahma actually mean? So who is going to take that on?
Hello, Madhu?
Yeah, go for it.
Brahma means Vishnu, Lakshmi, Vedas, and Chaturmukha Brahma as well.
Yeah, keep going.
Going
Yeah, so you got most of it, and also Brahma also can mean jivas. Mukta jivas are also called Brahmas, and then jivas themselves, sentient beings, are themselves called Brahmas, because Brahma, as you know, is that which is big. So sentient being is bigger than the Jada Tattva, so we are also called Brahman. And we are in samsara, right? But the Mukti jivas are also called Brahman because the Mukta jivas are bigger than the ones that are in samsara. Chaturmukha Brahma is also called Brahman because he is the highest among the jivas. So he is the biggest among the jivas. So he is called Brahman. Lakshmi is also called Brahman, and again mentioned in the Gita in so many places, because she is ever liberated, always in company of the Supreme Being, and she is the next to this Vishnu Tattva. She is the highest. So she is also called Brahman. And our Paramatma is also called Brahman. Now, to know this Brahman, there is this huge body of text, right? So those huge body of text, what we call as Vedas, is also called Brahma. So it really depends when the word Brahma comes, either in the Upanishads or in the Gita, what we should do is we should look at the context in which that word Brahma is, and then take these 6 meanings and see which one is relevant here and understand what the meaning of the verse is. So if you take that approach, what does this Brahma here mean? So the Brahma here means the Vedas. And I'll tell you why. Because look at the very next letter there, it's called Ja. Ja means what? So you have 2 words, right? One is called Aja and the other one is called Ja. Who is going to tell me what Aja means? Any idea?
First one.
No birth.
No birth,
No.
correct. So Aja
Unborn.
means unborn.
Unborn.
Unborn is Aja. Whereas the opposite of Aja is Ja. Ja means born. Okay. So when you take that word Brahmaja, it is so fascinating when you read the Upanishad in this spirit. So Brahmaja means he who is born from the Vedas. So what does that mean? He who is born from the Vedas means he about whom the knowledge is actually arises from the Vedas. He can be known only through the Vedas. So Brahmaja means he who can be known only through the Vedas. Okay.
Madhu,
So,
sorry, just wanted to say, like, in our thing, Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, they're called Dvijas, isn't it? Twice born.
yeah.
Yeah, is that right? And also, Padmaja means the one who comes from the lotus. Is that right?
Correct. So Ja, yeah. So that, yeah, correct. So that way, if you take like that, so Brahmaja, Dvija, Padmaja, and all that. So Ja there means born. So Brahmaja means Brahma is Veda, Ja is born. Born of the Vedas means he who can be known through the Vedas. Okay, so that is the first beautiful meaning of Brahmaja. So I'm going to again ask a question here. What are the 3 means of knowledge for us to know about anything? And what is the only means of knowledge to know Brahman? So who is going to take that on? So what are the 3 means of knowledge? Any takers?
Pratyaksha, Anumana, Pramana.
Yeah, Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Agamas.
Agamas, sorry.
Yeah. So those are the 3 means of knowledge. Okay. So Pratyaksha, that we see things through our sense organs. Anumana is inferential knowledge. And Agama is a revelatory scriptures. So Vedas are revelatory scriptures, and this chap, Brahman or God, cannot be known through our Indriyas. Our material Indriyas can never know him. And with whatever instrument that we measure things, we cannot infer that he is present either. Inference also, using material instruments, you cannot know him. And our Shastras are very clear. He can be known only through the revelatory scriptures. So we have spoken about this quite a lot. There is a session on the Apaurusheyatva of Vedas and why Vedas are supreme scriptures. So go back and look at those lectures and understand, to sort of reinforce our understanding as to how God can be known only through revealed scriptures. There is no other way. Okay, that essentially is the meaning of Brahmaja. He who can be known only through the Vedas. Say, for example, look at Pippala the Shruti. It says, Na Indriyani, Na Anumanam, Vedahi eva enam Vedayanti Tasmad Ahuhu Vedaha. It even gives you the definition of why we call it as Vedas, because he can be known only through these scriptures. Okay. Now in Brahma Sutra, there is the most important, third sutra. This is not the second sutra. This is the third sutra. What is the third sutra of Veda Vyasa? Shastra Yonitvat. He can be known only through the Shastras. So when you look at the Upanishads internal evidence, and you also take the sutras. And also, of course, Krishna has said, Vedaishta sarvair ahameva vedyaha. So when you take the prasthana trayas in this word, it fits in perfectly well. So when Yama says Brahmaja, what it means is he can be known only through the Vedas. And what is he known as in the Vedas? When you know about him in the Vedas, what is that thingy that you learn from the Vedas about him? Jnam. Jnam means what? Jnam means knowledge. He who is a source of infinite knowledge. Jnana Anandamaya. Jnanamaya. Yeah. So Jnam means omniscient. Yeah, that is literally the meaning of Jnam. So Mundaka Upanishad, as you know, says, yes, sarvajnaha sarvavid. Yasya jnanamayam tapaha. So what does the Vedas tell about him? Yes, sarvajnaha sarvavid. He is the omniscient being. So when Yama puts this word Brahma Jagnyam, you say Brahma plus Ja plus Nyam, then you understand that he is an omniscient being. So just doing trikarma krit alone is not enough. You need to know that behind all this, there is the supreme Brahman who is Brahma Jagnyam. And again, our Veda Vyasa in the second sutra, he said, Janmadhyasya yataha, that he who is the creator of the universe. Why did he say that he is the creator of the universe? Because it gives us an idea of the omniscience of Brahman. Okay, so this is an important concept. And again, we have discussed this before. Just because he's the creator of the universe, he is not called God. Okay, we use the concept of creatorship to understand that he is omniscient. So that is the meaning there. We understand he is omniscient because we as mortal beings, we see something around us. What do we see? We see this beautiful universe. And then we say this universe is so vast and it is so big and it works so intricately. So for somebody to create this universe, he needs to have so much knowledge, infinite knowledge to create this universe. So that is the reason why we define the Supreme Brahman as Janmadhyasya Yataha, so that we have a knowledge of his Jnam. Yeah, so this becomes a very important verse. Brahma Jagnyam is such a beautiful Vaidika word, which actually tells us that he is an omniscient being. Understand this Brahman who is behind all this as the omniscient being, and that you are surrendering yourself with all the things that you are doing because you're surrendering it to this omniscient being. So that is the first contemplation of the Supreme Being as Brahma Jagnyam. Next, you contemplate.
Madhu, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. There's a question. Like, this sort of revelations are, yes, fine, that we all agree. But what about this? Anybody can come and say, my scripture is there, God's one, that anybody, it's happening now, isn't it? All over the world. So how do we, challenge that?
So I think the answer to that is the authority. So this boils down, Sudarshan, it's a good point. It boils down to, so he says one person's scripture is, for a person X, for example, his scripture that he follows is the most important for him. But for another person, the scripture that he follows may be important for him, and he may say that is the most important. So how do you kind of reconcile this? So the question there is the pramanyatva of the Shastra, that is authoritativeness. So it comes to what is called as authoritativeness. So next, the question there is, how do you know that a particular scripture is authoritative? So the authoritativeness of the scriptures, there is a lot of literature, Sudarshan, talking about how do you know a particular literature is authoritative? Is it based on the composer? Okay, so if you take that view, so my composer of the scripture is supreme knowledgeable, he's so knowledgeable, so it is authoritative. Then there is a whole slew of problems as to how do you prove that that person is most authoritative? How do you know that that person is most knowledgeable, and so on? So that argument goes on. So to try and answer this head on, what our Vedic rishis have formulated is that, and that is one of the fundamental views of Sanatana Dharma, is Vedas are not composed by anybody. It is apaurushaya, and that is why it assumes its great authoritativeness. So that is a very unique concept of Sanatana Dharma, of accepting Vedas, because they are not composed by anybody, therefore they are authoritative. Because once you have somebody who composes a scripture, then all the faults come in. Faults of the person who composes it, the possibility that that person may be deceiving it, the possibility that person may actually be putting some false concepts into it. All those ideas come in. So it is the Vedas that are Apaurushya. Because of Apaurushya, they are supremely authoritative. So that is the view, Sudarshan. I hope that answers that question. But as I said, we can always go back to that session that we did on Veda Apaurushayatva and then kind of revise on that. Maybe we can re-look at it at some point in the future.
Sure, Madhu. Thank you.
So as we move on, so Brahma Jagnyam, then Yama says, this chap is not only Brahma Jagnyam, he is Devam. Okay, what does Devam actually mean? And then immediately he says Idiom. So this is one compound word, Devam Idiom. So you split it open into Devam and Idiom. Idiom is very easy. Idiom means one who is worshipped by all. Devam is an interesting word. Now, Devam, the English word divine. The Western concept of divinity, the Western concept of divine actually comes from the Sanskrit word Deva, okay, which essentially means light. Light of what? Light of knowledge. Okay, so that is one very, very simple and easy to understand view of who this Deva is. He is knowledge himself. He is Brahma Jagnyam, therefore he is called Devam. But Deva also has 8 other meanings in Sanskrit etymology. Divu Dyutav, Divu Kridayam, Divu Vijigishayam, Divu Kantav, Divu Vyavahare, Divu Stutav, Divu Gatav, Divu Samartye. So this is all splitting open and understanding it. But for today's purpose, all that we can take home the message is, he is Brahma Jagnyam, therefore he is called as Devam. Now, I put a small quiz here. This word Bhargo, where does this word Bhargo comes? And we have dealt with this. Who is going to take that one? The word Bharga, Bhargaha or Bhargo, in which mantra does it come?
Gayatri mantra.
Okay, excellent. So do you want to recite the Gayatri mantra, Shushrut?
Om Bhur Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat.
Thank you, Sushil. So look at those beautiful words. Is Bhargo Devasya, Bhargaha, Devaha. So when we look at critical analysis of mantras, these words come again and again. So Devaha is also there in Gayatri, and that is also qualified as Bhargaha. So why is he called as Bhargaha? The Surya Namaka Paramatma, who is lustrous and is full of light, is also called Bhargaha because Bhargaha means Ba plus Rati plus Gaha. Bha means lustrous, effulgent and light. So when we think about Devam, think about Bhargaha of Gayatri mantra. Okay. So in Sanatana Dharma, the supreme Brahman is called Deva. Okay. But folks may ask, but in the Vedic pantheon, there are so many devatas. So are we then pantheistic with regards to worshipping a million gods, but we don't have one Deva and there are millions of gods? So this is a pantheistic religion. So if somebody asks you that question, how are you going to tackle that? So who wants to take this one on? Any takers? So if somebody says you have 33 crore devatas, some say 9 crore devatas, and then you're saying Deva here. So is there only one Deva or there are millions of devatas? How are you going to answer that?
I think the same, Hinduism says there's only one God. I mean, our Dharma says only one God, but we can sort of worship him in many other forms. Yeah. So that is the standard reply which we give to anybody like our younger generation or other, non-Indians or asking. So is that, well, that's very crude anyways. We need to qualify it.
Yeah, so that's one way of approaching this problem, Sudarshan. Thank you. I think Pratibha had unmuted briefly.
I just wanted to tell there's only one Lord who pervades through all the other 33 crores of devatas. Maybe that one.
Okay, yes, that's good, Pratibhaji. Thank you very much. So the answer there is, we have only one Deva. There may be a million Devatas or demigods who operate under his jurisdiction, who are members of his families. There are millions and millions of sentient beings in the universe, and those demigods are tattva abhimani devatas and so on, who have some portfolios in the universe. But even in those portfolios, there is this supreme deva who is an antaryamin of all these devatas. So that one antaryamin is called deva. So I just have taken a few examples in the Upanishads and Vedas, which is very important. Say, for example, Rig Veda, there is a very famous verse: Indram, Mitram, Varunam, Agnim, Ahuhu, Ato Divyaha, Sa Suparno, Gurutman, Ekam Sat, Vipra, Bahuda Vadanti, Agnim, Yamam, Matarishwanam, Ahuhu. These are all profound verses of Rig Veda. And if anybody asks this question, you should memorize this. Ekam Sat, Vipra, Bahuda Vadanti. So in Hinduism, there is only Ekam Sat. Okay. The same Rig Veda also shows, Yo Devanam Namada Eka Eva Tam Samprashnam Bhuvanayanti Anya. Yo Devanam Namada Eka Eva, in the sense that there is only one Deva, and he's got infinite names, and his infinite names have been distributed to all other sentient beings who are there in this universe. But there is only one Deva. Look at Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Again, a very important verse. Eko Devaha, Sarva Bhuteshu Gudaha, Sarva Vyapi, Sarva Bhutantaratma, Karmadi Akshaha, Sarva Bhutadi Vasaha, Sakshi, Cheta, Kevalo Nirgunascha. Okay, so there are 9 qualities of this supreme being that is described in Shvetashvatara Upanishad, starting with Ekaha, and he is called Devaha, or one Deva. So for us, there is only one Deva, and all others are under his control. Yeah. So that Deva is, we call him as Brahmajagam, because he can be known only through the Vedas. And when we know him, what do we realize? Idiom, that he is worshipped by all. He is worshipable by all, and he is worshipped by all. Viditva. So once you know Viditva, once you know the central doctrine of Sanatana Dharma as Brahmajagnyam Devamediam Viditva, next is a very beautiful verse. Nichaya Imam Shantim Atyantameti. Okay, so again, you have to, Yama is not an ordinary chap. When he says these mantras, and when Kata Rishi sees all this, these words of Yama has got profound philosophical significance, and it will serve us very well. Actually, looking at these words, this ancient, these are all archaic Vedic Sanskrit words, and we need to look at them very carefully to understand what is the depths of philosophy that Yama is talking about. Let us look at this line here. Nichayam, Imam. So if you just take those words, Nichaya. Nichaya means God realization. Okay. So what does it mean? So when you have the knowledge of Brahman, that he is Devam, he is Idyam, he is Brahmajagnyam, when you know him, then you will get what is called as Nichayam. Nichayam means God realization. God realization is also called Aparoksha Jnana, which is also, as you know, popularly known as opening your third eye. Who gets this? Imam. Who are these imams? These are the souls who are self-realized. How have they self-realized? They not only though that they are souls, they've also realized this, they've got this Aparoksha Jnana or God realization. Yeah. So when you have self-realization followed by God realization, then what happens? Shantim Atyantam Yeti. So the Shantim Atyantam Yeti is also a very beautiful compound word. You need to separate it out. You have Shantim, you have Ati, Antam, Yeti. Yeti is very easy, attains. Antam means that which has an end. Ati means that which is beyond an end, which means it is endless or everlasting. So Ati Antam means endless and everlasting. What is that? Shantim. So this person who has self-realization and God realization eventually reaches the state called Shanti. Okay. Now this Shanti, again, we have done this before. Shanti is not just peace. It doesn't mean peace. Or Shanti means not peace, that there is no violence and therefore there is Shanti. No, that is not the Sanskrit, the ancient meaning of Shanti. And as I said, the etymology of this, we have done this before. Sha, Anta and E. Sha is Sham, Shanno Mitruhu, Sham Varunaha. So all those words in Veda, Sham means Ananda, E means Jnana, Anta means the end of Jnana and Ananda for us. Yeah, for us, that is the final state of Jnananandamaya. So which actually means moksha. So Shanti essentially means liberation from the cycle of birth and death and reaching that state of innate bliss and ananda of yourself. So until you reach that state, you will never find peace in this samsara. So that is the ultimate meaning of the word Shanti. So our friend Yama is very clear. He says, Trikarma krit tarati janma mrutyuhu. How? Brahmajagnyam devamediam viditva nichayam imam shantim atyantameti. So the Shantim is an important word. So let's look at Shantim in the Gita. And in Gita, there are several places where the word Shanti comes in. So I would be grateful if one of you want to pick up these verses 270 and 271. So who wants to take it? 270. And I want one of the other friends to be ready with 271. So who wants to take this verse of Gita 270, please? Neetaji, go for 270.
Yep. Okay. Apuryamanam achala pratishtham samudramapah pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashanti mapnoti na kamakami.
Beautiful, Neetaji. So you can see Krishna is saying the Shantim. So there, that Shantim, please don't confuse yourself getting peace. The Shantim that Krishna is talking about is eventually you will get that moksha if you follow what Krishna has given, the prescription that he has given in chapter 2 of how you have to be calm, you don't get vacillated with the senses and control your mind and everything else. If you do that, you will reach Shanti eventually, means moksha. Who wants to take 271? Veena-ji.
Vihaya kamanya sarvan pumamscharati nisprahah nirmamo nirahankarah sashanti madhigacchati.
So again, thank you, Veena-ji. Again, he who controls the mind eventually will reach peace. Peace means not no disturbance. It means moksha. So wherever in the Gita the word Shanti comes, it actually means only moksha. Okay, and the same thing is what Yama is also saying when he says Nichayam imam shantim atyantam yeti. Okay, so here I just want to remind you of this, the journey of souls. Yeah, we are souls, right, in this samsara. So what is the journey of souls, and how beautifully our Yama summarizes in these two verses the entire journey of souls that we have done on several occasions. And I've also told you about this beautiful verse from Jayatirtha. And I'm not tired of reciting this again and giving you this concept here. What did Jayatirtha say? Paramatmano atyanta binnasya swatah chid anandadi atmasya kasyapi jivasya anadi avidya kama karmadi nimitto ayam paramartata eva anyata karaha dukkadi anartaha na parameshwara prasadat rute apagacchati nacha asakshat kurto asau prasidati nacha avidita swarupaha shakyate shakshat kartum iti sakala guna karataya Nishesha dosha gandha vidurayata cha tam pratipadayatum aseshamnayaha pravartante tad upakarana bhuta cha brahma mimamsa iti paramartaha. So this is a summary of the Vedic philosophy. What is it? This supreme being can be known only through the Vedas. First point. And our Yama has said that is why he is called Brahmajagnyam. He is to be known as the abode of infinite auspicious attributes and without any defects. And that is why our Yama said Devam Idyam. Then unless we know him, we cannot see him. Viditva means unless we know him. Unless we see him, we cannot obtain his grace. Nichaya imam. So imam is us. Nichaya means this God realization or aparoksha jnana. So that is what that means. Unless we see him means nichayam. And then what happens? God's grace is absolutely essential for the release of bondage, which is what Yama has said. Shantim ati antam eti. And then this concept of divine grace, he will actually discuss this in great detail in the second Valli, same Yama. And this doctrine of grace, na ayamatma pravachanena labhyaha, na medaya, na bahuna shrutena, yam yevesha vrunute tena labhyaha, tasya esha atma vivrunute tanun swam. So he will talk about this grace in the second Valli. But in this verse, in this beautiful verses, he has actually summarized the essence, the complete Vedic philosophy of journey of souls to attain liberation. So I hope you find that interesting, because what we should do, given every opportunity in these forums, is always do a comparative analysis and understand what we have read before in other areas and see how our Yama is bringing the philosophy. And as again I've said, there is complete unison, there is full samanvaya of Shastra. Everywhere it is the same thing that is being discussed, and it is up to us to revise and understand this as much as we can. Okay, so moving on to the next stage. So immediately after what Yama has said here, then what he goes is, he says, Trinachiketaha trayametat viditva ya evam vidwan chunute nachiketam. So the next word that he says is Trinachiketaha. So now we are all experts on what the Trinachiketaha is, because we know from the previous class he talked about Ya Ishtakaha Yavatirva Yatava, the number 360, Kunda, Pinda and Kala, Padya, Gadya and Gana of the Vedas, and how you do the Trikarma, Krit, Tapaha, Dhanaha, Yajnaha, and when do you do that? Morning, afternoon and evening. So this is also you do when three timelines, past, present and future. And this fellow who is this Brahman who is controlling everything. So the concepts of three has to come here. When we say Trinachiketaha trayametat viditva, we need to know everything about the threes. And we have done a lot about the threes, right? Three gunas, Srishti, Sthiti, Samhara. Yeah. And then of course there are the three famous mantras, Om Achyutaya Namaha, Om Anantaya Namaha, Om Govindaya Namaha, Achyutabhyo, Anantabhyo, Govindebhyo Namaha, and all those upasanas that we do of three is essentially this Trinachiketaha trayametat viditva ye evam vidvan chinute nachiketa. Chinute means chayana. Chayana means anusandana. Anusandana means upasana. That is the spirit in which you worship the Supreme. And what is that spirit, that Nachiketam of Kala, Pinda and Kunda? Now here is where you have to link everything. In Kunda, what do we do as an upasana? We use Agni. And we have done that previous classes, right? Why Agni is the most important pratika or symbol of worshipping the Supreme. So on earth, Prithvi on the right side. So on earth, the most important form or symbol to worship the Supreme is Agni. And on your face, for those of you who do these kind of contemplation, on the face, it is the mouth which is the seat of Agni. Okay, and who is going to answer that question? Why do we say this mouth area is the seat of Agni? So who wants to take that one? We are not talking about Aham Vaishwanaro Bhutva, who is inside. That is Brahman. Okay, but here when you do Agni Upasana and you say mouth is the seat of Agni, what does that signify? Any takers for that? So Agni is the tongue, right? The speech. So Abhimani Devata of speech is Agni. There are very many Abhimani Devatas, one of whom is Agni. Okay, speech, Vedas, you recite the Vedas, speech, right? Agni, so that is where the Agni is. So Antariksham and Dhyau. Dhyau is the area where the sun is. So that is Aditya. So Aditya Namaka Paramatma Upasana happens in Kala, right, of Yama, and that is Aditya. That Aditya is in the eye. Why do we worship Aditya in the eye? Who wants to answer that? That's easy. So why do we worship Aditya in the eye?
Because we can see that.
Yeah, that's right. We can see because there is a sun which got the light, and the light showers on an object, and we see through our eyes that object. So that is one way of looking at it. But the other way of this eye is an indriya, right? The Abhimani Devata of the eye is Surya. Yeah, and the same Surya is also there in the sun. So everything is linked. What is there in Brahmanda is also in your Pindanda. So the Abhimani Devata of Chakshus is Surya. So Surya is in the eye. And look at this Vayu. Vayu is the Antariksha. Antariksha is the atmosphere where this air is. And this Vayu is in the nose. And that makes full sense because our air goes through the nose. So by eyes and nose and mouth, we are actually doing that upasana of Kala, Pinda and Kunda, and of what Nachiketa has taught us. And exactly the same thing when Sushrut was reciting the Gayatri mantra, Bhur, Bhuvas, Suvaha. The Bhu is Prithvi, Bhuvaha is Antariksha, Swaha is Dhyau. And when we did Mandukya Upanishad, we understood that Akara, Ukara, and Makara, they stand for Bhu, Bhuvaha, and Swaha, which are the Vyahritis, whereas this is the Pranava. So when we now expand how Yama is taking us from Pranava Upasane to the Pindanda and the Brahmanda and Kala, it is simply wonderful with regards to how this philosophy actually matures and blossoms as the Upanishad progresses. So here you need to understand the spirit or the Anusandana in which the three is described by Yama in this Katha Upanishad. Okay, so now we move on in the next verse. So what then our Yama will say is, once you do this upasana, Trinachiketaha, Trayametad viditva, ya evam vidwan chunute nachiketam, sa mrityupashan purataha pranodya shokatigo modate swargaloke. Okay, so this is a very nice way of concluding that philosophy that Yama says. He says Yama is giving these instructions and he says sa mrityu pashan. So mrityu, what is that mrityu there? There are two meanings for mrityu. One, mrityu is our Yama. So he says that fellow who knows about Brahman, worships him, gets his grace, he will lose that. I will actually stop binding him to samsara. Some mrityu pashan. Pasha means what? A rope. Mrityu means tied to this rope, bandha. Okay. Pranodya means remove. Yeah. Pranodya means removal. So saha, that person, mrityu pashan pranodya. Okay. I will remove him of this bondage of death is one way of looking at it. The other way of is, for us, the real bandha is karma bandha. Okay, because we are tied in this rope called the karma bandha, we are actually going through samsara. Okay, so that is the key for us. And then, of course, we can do a whole lot of scientific analysis as to why we do karmas and why certain karmas are bandha and other karmas are not. Then you go to the Krishna's, teachings in Gita and talk about nishkama karma, sakama karma, and how nishkama karma does not bind, whereas sakama karma binds. Then we understand the science there. But the key there is karma bandha. That is our sakama karma is what that binds us into this mrityu loka. This is the real mrityu pasha. Yeah. But he who does that complete surrender that we were talking about. So that guy, saha mrityu pashan pranodya. Okay. He will shed his that bondage of birth and death. Purataha is interesting here. Purataha essentially means initially or first. So there are two ways of looking at this verse. The first thing that Yama is saying is that person who is practicing Nishkama Karma Yoga as a surrender to the Supreme and knowing that Supreme is Brahmajagnyam Devami Idyam Viditva, what happens to them, to that person? First, Shokatigo Modate Swargaloke. So first he will go to this temporary Swargaloka and stay there for 1 Manvantara. I have a slide coming up next about talking about Manvantara and the duration. And then what will happen is at the Mahapralaya, then he will cross over. He'll shed his Linga Sharira, cross over and reach that ultimate state, which is again described as Shokatigo Modate Swargaloke, which is the place of permanent bliss. Shokaha means sorrow. Atigo means Atikaha means he who has surpassed sorrow, but has a positive experience of Ananda, described as Modate, where in Swargaloka. Okay, so that is the sequence. The journey of souls is what Yama is actually talking here. Now, let us look at the Swargaloka again. Shokatigo Modate Swargaloke. So again, it's important. What is that Swargaloka? Yeah, and I'm giving you extra evidences here as to what is it that Swargaloka that Yama is talking about. Not just the heavenly planetary systems where Indra and other fellows, including Yama, are there having lots of fun. Not just that, but that Swargaloka actually means something totally different. Why? And we have dealt with this before, but I'm going to come with a slightly different angle here. Swargaloka means what? Swarga plus Loka. Swarga is what? What is the etymology of Swarga? Swaha plus Kaha. Kaha, one meaning of Kaha is abode. So it means the abode of this person called Swaha. Who is Swaha? So we have done Chandogya Upanishad, right? So I just want to remind you of chapter 6. And in the chapter 6 discussion, the very first example that Shvetaketu was being taught by his father Uddalaka Aruni. What did he say? Uddalako Arunihi Shvetaketum Putram Uvacha Swapnantam me Somya Vijanihi iti Yatra etat Purushaha Swap iti nama Sata Somya Tada Sampanno Bhavati Swam Apito Bhavati Tasmadenam Swap iti Achakshate Swam hi Apito Bhavati. So that wording is very important because that gives you the idea of who the Swa is. So essentially the Upanishad itself describes who the Swa is. Swam apito bhavati. Okay, Swam apito bhavati. That is why it's called Swa. So Swa there is Swatantra. Swatantra means an independent being. Who is that independent being? Swatantram Bhagavan Vishnu. Okay, so Swatantram is that Vishnu, and in the Susupti state, what happens? This Jiva goes and Apitaha, Swam Apitaha Bhavati. He goes and sleeps very close to him, and that is why it is called Swap. Okay, because he goes close to the Swam. So it is that same Swam that is described here as Swa. So the abode of Swaha, the abode of Vishnu. So Vishnu's abode, which means Vaikunta. Okay, so Swarga means Vaikunta in Parama Mukhya Vritti, as we call it, or the highest levels of etymological interpretations that you're supposed to do on Vedic scriptures rather than skimming the surface. The second meaning, Swa Ramanam Ka. So this is Swa Kaha is the abode of Vishnu. The other meaning is Swa Ramanam Ka. Ka again is abode. Swa Ramanam, that place where we as Jivas experience our inner bliss or our inherent bliss is called Swa Ramanam Kaha Swargaha or Swa Ramanam Gamayati, that place where we attain our own inherent bliss. So when we look at Swarga, there are so many other ways of looking at it, but these are the three easy ones that I've given you that gives you an idea that Swarga essentially is Vishnu Loka or Vaikunta. Parama Upanishad, there is another Upanishad which actually talks about this. Swatantrayat Swaha iti Proktaha. End of discussion. Yeah, because he is independent, he is called Swaha. Okay, so Having had all these discussions with Nachiketa, so Yama has basically in the second word. Remember, we are still in the second vara, right? We are still in the second boon that our friend Nachiketa asked. Look, I want to know about that Agni, not the Agni that my dad is doing, where he is going to heavenly planets. No, I don't want to know about that. I want to know about that particular fire sacrifice, knowing which I can actually go to the state of liberation. So for that, over the last 3 classes, Yama has actually taught Nachiketa as to what that Agni is, in what spirit you have to do. Now, in our schools, our teachers teach that, right? And that is exactly how the approach of Yama has been. And again, it gives you an idea of how that instruction in Gurukula also happened in those Vedic times, where your guru will teach the students who are in the Gurukula. They go to Gurukula, say, what, 12 years, right? Usually they start at 12 years and then they go for 12 years in Gurukula. And then they come for Grihastha at the age of 24. So they are still kids in the school called the Gurukula in the Vedic times. So the teacher is teaching all this. And similarly, Yama, who is the guru, Nachiketa, who is this tiny little boy who is 8 years of age, and Yama is teaching him. Okay. At that point, once Yama has done this discussion of teaching him, then he asks him, Yama says to Nachiketa, Nachiketa, I've taught you so much for so long. Now what I want you to do is, I want you to recapitulate all that I have taught you so far. I want you to not memorize and just vomit it out, but I want you to tell me all the things that you have understood that I have taught you so far. And that is one way in which our gurus of ancient times used to, get that reinforcement that what they are teaching, the students are actually learning. And in our classrooms, we do it all the time. And that's why I put this cartoon here, that this teacher is teaching something. And then he asks a question to test whether the students have understood what he is teaching. And that exactly is what Yama does. And how does that go? Sacha api tat pratya vadat yatoktam. So what does that mean? Tat pratyavadat yata uktam. So Yama yata uktam means all the thing that he has said. Tat pratyavadat. So tat is what? This Nachiketa. Pratyavadat. Pratyavadat means pratyabudya yatavat anvavadat. So that means he understood all that Yama had said, full and anusandana. He actually understood, not just memorized and memorized all the verses, but like you and me who have learned over the last 3 sessions, he understood. Yata ata asya mrutyuhu punarevaha tushta. So he said with all, with sincerity, whatever Yama had said, he actually recited it back to Yama, Nachiketa. He said, this is all I've understood, Yama, all that you taught me about this Swargyam Agni. So Yama at that point was really happy. Yata asya mrutyuhu tushtaha. Tushtaha means very happy. Mrutyuhu here means Yama. Yata asya. So after he heard about all the things that Nachiketa recited, he was very, very happy. And then punaha eva aha. Punarevaha is the word. You split it open. Punaha eva aha. Punaha means again, he said. So after hearing Nachiketa reciting all the things that Yama has taught, Yama was so happy. And that is very true, isn't it? If, for example, we make all the effort to teach our students and the students then answer the questions that we ask, we feel very happy. What? That the student has understood and that the teacher also feels that he has done a good job. So with that spirit, Yama was very happy. And he said, Punarevaha tushtaha. Okay, and he spoke again. What did he speak? Tam abravit priyamano mahatma varam tava iha adya dadami bhuyaha. Because when Nachiketa recited it so perfectly, all the thing that Yama has taught, and when Yama understood that Nachiketa has understood everything that he has taught, Yama was so happy. He said, you know what, Nachiketa, I'm so pleased with you. I'm going to give you right now another boon. I'm going to give you another vara now. Yeah, because I'm so pleased with how dedicated a student you are. So what did he give? Immediately he gave 2 extra varas. The story started off with Yama saying, because you stayed awake for 3 nights, waited for me, I'll give you 3 varas. But then now he says, I'm going to give you extra varas because you're such a good student. What did he give? Tavaiva namna bhavita ayam agnihi shrunkam cha imam aneka rupam gruhana. So he said, 2 things I'm going to give you now. This Swargyam Agnim that I was talking to you about, the Kunda and Pinda and Kala, I am going to hereafter name this as Nachiketa Agni. Okay, I'm going to name this from now on. These 3 aspects of doing that surrender to the Supreme will be called as Nachiketa Agni. And then, because our Yama was wearing lots of jewelry and he had this gold chain on his neck, and he said, Shrunkam cha imam aneka rupam gruhana. Here, I'm taking this gold chain from my neck. Here, take this gold chain. Okay, so these are all the 2 immediate varas that Yama gives. Okay, here is this is how the story, the vision of Nachiketa evolves. It is not a story, as you know, it is a vision of Nachiketa, and how the vision of Nachiketa then evolves. So our friend Nachiketa says, Yama, you are very clever, mate. You're giving me 2 extra boons. Thank you for actually naming these 3 yajnas in my name, Nachiketa Agni. But then he refuses. Shrunkam cha imam aneka rumam. Shrunka means chain. Aneka rupam. Rupam means in different colors and different forms. The jewelry of different colors and different forms. Technically, it means gold jewelry. So again, in the Vedic times, having gold jewelry was a matter of prestige, yeah, and wealth. So Yama is actually, here is when this is a prelude to the 3rd vara. In the 3rd vara, as we will see in the tail end of today's talk and next session, there is a whole lot of discussion where Yama actually tests Nachiketa as to what his real spirit and intentions of getting that knowledge is. So here he will initially give him the vara, this Agni will be called Nachiketa Agni, but then he'll do a small test. Take this gold chain. Okay, but our friend Nachiketa said, thank you very much, but no thanks. I don't want your gold chain. But you are going to name this Kunda, Pinda and Kala Agni sacrifice in my name. I like it. Thank you very much. So he says, thank you for the Nachiketa Agni, but he refuses to take the gold chain from Yama. So Yama says, okay, all right, as you wish. You don't want the gold chain. Point taken. I understand why you don't want the gold chain. But he says, okay, Yeshate Agnir Nachiketaha Swargyo Yam Avrinita Dvitiyena Varena Yetamagnim Tavaivaiva Pravakshanti Janasaha. Now Tritiyam Varam Nachiketo Vrinishva. So what he says is, okay, you don't want the gold chain, I understand, but okay, I've taught you, asked for the 2nd vara, yeah, which is called Swargyam Agnim. I will name it as Nachiketa Agnim. Yam Avrunita Dvitiyena Varena. The 2nd boon you have chosen, I have taught you well, haven't I? Because you recited all the things I said, you understood well. So I have taught you well, and you also learned well. What is the 2nd Agni? The Swargyam Agnim, the sacrifice that you do to go to moksha. So then he says, Yetam Agnim, as you wish, Nachiketa, Yetam Agnim, Tavaiva Pravakshanti Janasaha. So that means Janasaha. There are 2 ways of looking at it. This Agni will be celebrated by people as Nachiketam Agnim. And people will also know that, people will also say that this Agni sacrifice was taught by Nachiketa to Nachiketa only by Yama. Yama did not teach this to any other mortal person. He taught this only to Nachiketa. So people will appreciate this from 2 angles. One, this will be called as Nachiketa Agni, and that people will recognize that you are the only mortal who was selected by Yama to teach about this Agni. So after 3 weeks of discussing the 2nd boon, then Yama will say, you know what, we have done 2 varas now. I also gave you the extra vara, which you also accepted. Now ask me the 3rd vara. Okay. Tritiyam varam Nachiketo Vrinishva. Please ask your 3rd vara, is what Yama will then ask Nachiketa. Okay, so we got another 15 minutes. So let me see what I can do in the 15 minutes. And the third vara is just beautiful. I mean, I can't explain what adjectives to use here. If you thought the second vara was beautiful around the various fire sacrifices, how we do it, the third vara becomes even more beautiful. The philosophy escalates with every vara and every discussion. It just goes up and up and up. So Nachiketa then goes for the third vara. What does he ask? Yeyam prete vichikitsa manushye asti iti eke na ayam asti iti cha eke. Etad vidyam anushishtaha tvaya aham varanamesha varaha tritiyaha. Okay, so this is a very, very famous verse, and it is a very famous vara. Okay, so what I want to do today is, before we close, let me at least do the contextual relevance of the third vara, because this is important. Without understanding what is it that Nachiketa is asking in the third vara, it would not do justice to the philosophy that Yama is going to be talking to us about. Okay, so I'm going to do a Simha Avalokana Nyaya. I'm going to do a very, very brief revision here to get you back. Okay, what was the first vara? Shanta Sankalpaha Sumanaha Yatasyad Vitamanyuho Gautamo Ma Abhi Mrutyoho Tvat Prasrishtaha Mam Abhivadet Pratitaha Yetat Trayanam Pratamam Varam Vrune. So he said, what is my first vara? My father told me off and said, go to hell. Mrityavetva dadaniti, and I left this gross body and I have gone to Yamaloka, and I waited there for 3 days. And the first vara was, he said, I want to go back to my father now. I want to go back to that gross body that I left, and I want to carry on with my life on earth. That was clearly the first vara. So then what Nachiketa is saying is, once I go back, once I am back on earth with my father, I want to do that fire sacrifice that will eventually take me to moksha. That was the second vara. And remember, Nachiketa is asking these varas on our behalf also, so that in Mrityu Loka, when we are here, we follow the second vara and then make our way towards moksha. So it is, we are not, we should, I've told you this before, we should all become Nachiketas, not Shvetaketus, but Nachiketas. And when Nachiketa asked the second vara, what did he say? Once I'm back on earth, like us here with our family, I want to do that fire sacrifice that will take me to moksha, which is our goal in life. That is why the second vara all happened. Okay. So now, after the second vara, the next logical thing is, because we have gone to moksha, the discussion should be what happens in the moksha. Yeah, so that should be the contextual relevance of the third vara. This is very important for you to think about, because there are some transliteration that out there that don't seem to have picked up on this logical sequence of philosophy. Yeah, and I'll come to that a bit later for your own contemplation and comparative analysis. So I put the question here: how can the third vara be a discussion on whether souls exist after death or not? This is not contextually relevant, because in the first vara, he has actually given up his body and he has gone up to Yamaloka. And we have done two important verses, and that is important. What is the first verse? In the first vara, when he made that path, Bahunamemi Madhyamo, Bahunamemi Pratamo, Bahunamemi Madhyamaha, Kimsvid Yamasya Kartavyam Yanmaya Adya Karishyati. So what did Yama say? Nachiketa say that I will go to Yamaloka, one among the infinite that are going towards him, as somebody in the middle, or somebody who is the first of several other souls that are going to follow me to the Yamaloka. Okay, so that is the first point. And then the Yamadutas have said, Anupashyayata purve, Pratipashya tata pare, Sasyamiva martyaha pachyate, Sasyamiva jayate punaha. So Yamaduta said, look at all these souls who are being fried and cooked in Kumbhipaka. Look at them. They will all be fried, and again they'll go back to Mrityu-loka. So there are two key verses that I've already talked about this. And Yama and our Nachiketa has actually already shed the gross body, and he's going there with a subtle body. Okay, that is a preamble to the first vara. That is self-explanatory. So souls with subtle body go to Yama only after having shed the gross body. Okay, so one does not go to Yama and ask whether soul exists after death. That is a stupid question to ask, because you are going there as a soul. You have already shed your gross body. You are going there as a soul, and you are not going to go there as a soul and then say, do souls exist after death? So this is contextually irrelevant, and I just want you to take this on board, hold on to that thought, because there are many transliterations out there which seems to have missed this fundamental point of Vedic jurisprudence of how you understand the philosophy and the sequence. That is why prakarana becomes important, or the contextual relevance. So that is the first point, and this will all make sense when we discuss in the next session, when we have this discussion about the conversation with Yama and Nachiketa. This will all become evident. Okay, so now look at this very verse itself. What is the internal evidence within the sloka? So I want to finish today's talk looking at this. So what does it say? Yeyam prete vichikitsa manushye asti iti eke na ayam asti iti cha eke. So you split it over. So there is this word called prete. So what does prete means? So prete means literally giving up body. So you can give up two types of bodies. You can give up stula sharira, your gross body, or you can give up your linga sharira, or your subtlest of the bodies. Okay, so if you give up your gross body, which will happen to all of us at some point, so that is one prete. Okay, the real meaning, so that is in samsara. When you are in samsara, you give up your stula sharira and you become a prete. Okay, preta also means what? You know what preta is, ghost, right? So what does that mean? They have shed their gross bodies. So stula sharira. But in ultimate philosophy, giving up your linga sharira is the prete. Prakrishtena ita equals preta. Okay, so and that is relevant here, because in the second vara, that is what he is asked, that I want to give up all this and go to moksha, and we have just read that moksha means giving up your linga sharira. So in that contextual sequence, the preta here actually means linga sharira. You've given up your final body and you've crossed over to the non-material plane or Vaikuntha. Whereas giving up stula sharira has already been discussed. Yeah, jivas exist after giving up gross body has been discussed before. As I said, I just quoted these verses. Okay, and then that Brahman exists in moksha has also been discussed previously. Ananta lokaptim ato pratishtam vidhi tvam etam nihitam guhayam. This verse. So again, this Ananta Lokapti, once you go to moksha, there is this person with the name Ananta Lokapti, he is Pratishtam. He is there, has also been discussed. Okay, and that person who is there in Vaikuntha is also in your heart. Tvam yetam nihitam guhayam has also been discussed. Okay, so you have to go back and understand what the previous verses are. Without that, you cannot progress and pick up some irrelevant concept here. So this is important when we understand the philosophy of Katha Upanishad. So what Yama is actually saying here when he says Yeyam prete means when the jivas have given up the linga sharira, and once they have gone to moksha, there is a vichikitsa. What is that vichikitsa? Vichikitsa means what? Vichikitsa, one superficial meaning of vichikitsa means doubt or samshaya. But vichikitsa also means vicharana. Vicharana is vichikitsa. What is vichara? Vichara means vada. Vada means what? Discussion, debate or discussion, to know the truth. Okay, so what is that? The discussion or vada that is going on? Prete manushye. So prete manushye. Manushya means what? It is not just you and me, manushyas, who will eventually shed our linga sharira and go and cross over to the other side. There are devatas, there are rishis, there are all the jivas who will eventually, some of them who are eligible will cross over and go to the divine plane. So manushyaha there means mananashilaha. Mananashilaha means he who is able to who has the capacity for discriminative knowledge. So prete, so those who have had discriminative knowledge and have shed their linga sharira. So these muktas, jivas, devas, rishis, and manushyotamas, about those muktas, there is a vichara or a discussion. About mukta's situation, there is a vichara. So that is the meaning there. Okay. So after the second, so I'm not tired taking you and talking about the second vara. Second vara is about going to moksha. So the third vara then logically has to be, what is the situation in moksha is the third logical question. You do not go back and say, oh, do the souls exist or not? That has already been discussed in the first vara. Okay, so it's irrelevant. It is about discussion about the state of moksha is what is being discussed here. So what is that vichara or doubt? Do jivas retain identity in moksha? Are jivas different, equal, or become Brahman in moksha? Are jivas independent or dependent on Brahman in moksha? Is there niyamakatva Brahman in moksha? Is the key point. Niyamakatva means controlling power of Brahman in moksha. Is it also there in moksha? We understand it is there in samsara because we are not independent beings. We can't do anything in this life without divine providence. Is it the same situation in moksha also? So these are all the questions that Nachiketa has, that in moksha, what is this? What is happening? So to understand, to make us understand, Yama and Nachiketa, they start a whole slew of conversation, essentially about, is there niyamya niyamaka sambandha, as we call it. So what does that mean? Asti. Asti means what? Asti in a very colloquial Sanskrit means is there. It is there, is asti. But that is colloquial Sanskrit. That is not the language of the Vedic archaic Sanskrit. And Katha Upanishad is an ancient Sanskrit language where the etymology of asti is yat sat tato adhikam. Okay? Yama himself, I mean, this is not some other commentary. Yama himself later actually describes and gives a definition of what asti means. And we will do that in the second adhyaya. Asti yat sat tato adhikam. Sreshta vastu. That which is the highest of vastu is called asti. Okay. So what the question there is there niyamya niyamaka sambandha? What does that mean? Asti iti eke, which means once you go to moksha, these are all the questions that is happening. Some people think that one becomes Brahman. Some other people think we become equal to Brahman. Some other people think that we are still servants of the Brahman in moksha and that Brahman controls us. Okay, some people think Brahman don't controls us even in moksha. And in moksha, we are independent being capable of doing whatever we want, or actually we become Brahman ourselves. So asti iti eke means the knowledgeable know that niyamakatva of Brahman is there. That is, he is not only an independent controlling power in samsara, but also in moksha, he is an independent controlling power of all the released souls. The knowledgeable know the niyamakatva Brahman is there. Asti iti eke. So that is one group. Na ayam asti iti cha eke. There is another group of ignorant who think niyamakatva Brahman is not there. Yetat vidyam. I want to know all the details and greatness of Brahman as mukta, amukta, niyamaka. So that is the question. That is the third vara that Yama is asking. Whether we like it or not, that is the logical sequence of the philosophy of Katha Upanishad. Now, what I want to do today is I want to finish off with this beautiful verse on Purusha Shukta, because we should, as I said, we should always go back to what we have studied. And Purusha Shukta is the greatest of the Vedic philosophies. It summarizes the whole of the philosophy of the Upanishads. It is a whole summary of the Vedic philosophy is Purusha Shukta. And I think we spent about 4 or 5 months, I can't remember, doing Purusha Shukta. And then there is the second verse. So I'm going to call upon one of us to recite the first verse and the second verse. I don't know who wants to take it up. Somebody, I don't know if Sudarshan is around, but if anybody else wants to do the first and the second verse, please, to close off today's session. Who wants to do that? Okay, so there is a bit of a silence. So I will do the second verse. So what does the Purusha Shukta second verse says? Purusha eva idang sarvam yad bhutam yaccha bhavyam uta amrutatvasya ishanaha yad annena atirohati. Second verse. Look at this word. I've underlined this for our benefit. Uta means even. Amrutatvasya. Amrutatvasya means in moksha. Even in moksha, he is the Ishanaha. Uta amrutatvasya Ishanaha yad annena atirohati. Anna there means Lakshmi, Shri Tattva. Yad annena atirohati. Yeah, he is the controller of Mukta Jivas in moksha, and he is far beyond Lakshmi Tattva. Okay, Uta Amrutatvasya Ishanaha. So Purusha Shukta of the Rig Veda actually talks about this, about how the Supreme Brahman is the controller of Jivas even in moksha. I am sometimes amazed about how certain other schools of philosophy can conveniently forget these verses of Purusha Shukta and build their own airy-fairy castles. Good luck to them. But our spirit is, what is it that the Vedas is telling us? And the Vedas are very clear. Uta amrutatvasya ishanaha. What does that mean? He controls the mukta jivas even in moksha. That means there is a niyamya niyamaka sambandha. One can control only if there are two individual things. If A is there and B is there, then there is the concept of A controlling the B. If A and B are not there, there is no concept of controlling one controlling the other. So when Purusha Shukta, the supreme philosophy of the Rig Veda, says Uta Amrutatvasya Ishanaha, then that Ishanaha is Ishanam Anaha, Ishanam Varaha. So that is something else. We'll discuss it next week. So this is the question of Nachiketa. Because in the second Vara, he has got the Swargyam Agnim, and he now knows what is the technique to go to moksha. And then once somebody goes to moksha in the journey of souls, now our friend Nachiketa wants to know what is that situation, what do the knowledgeable think, what is the situation, what is the mahimas of the Supreme Lord who is there in moksha. So that is what he is asking. So there is a work of Acharya called Tattvodyota, which starts like this. Vimato binno muktatvat eddidam tattatayata sampratipannam. Vimato binnaha muktatvat. So there is a difference even in moksha. At least that is the view of two schools of Vedanta. The Visishtadvaita and the Dvaita are of the view Vimato binnaha muktatvat. There is a difference in moksha. The question is, when there is a difference, what is that relationship between the controlled and the controller? I want to know all the greatness of this controller who is Brahman himself, is the question of Nachiketa. This is the third Vara that Nachiketa is going to be asking. And our friend Yama is so clever that he will actually dodge this question so much. And in the process, he is going to test what is the aptitude, what is the intelligence, what is the dedication of Nachiketa. And through that, he will also be testing us to understand and find out whether we are also operating like Nachiketa. Okay, so we will deal with that in the next class. So on that note, I'm going to close today's session. Krishna Pranamastu, and we can take any questions.
Namaskar, Matsudanji. I know this is a silly question, but humbly I'm asking you this. This Nachiketa is taking us, he's kept a benchmark so high, which is making us enter. I was just thinking the second Agni, what he said, the Tapo Jnana, Tapo Yajna and Dana, along with Brahma Jnana, to reach that only it is tough. Now, according to him, as a human, would we be able to see the third also? Is that what his expectation is? Like we could see that being in this body, will we be able to know what happens in moksha? Or we should leave and then understand?
Okay.
If that is so, then we should have gone along with Brahma, we should all be together learning about this third Agni, right?
Yeah. So, okay. So thank you, Pratibhaji. Very well put. And it's an interesting question. So there are two aspects to that question. Number one is you are asking about, we are all here in samsara. How on earth are we going to know about moksha? Yeah, I think I got that right. How are you going to be happening? Number one. Number two is moksha even feasible or possible for those of us who are in samsara and we are still going through our mundane lives? So those are the two aspects I understood. So I'm going to take up the second aspect. The second aspect, as you know, is what are the four Purusharthas for us? So Pratibhaji, I'm going to throw it back to you. What are the four Purusharthas as dictated in Sanatana Dharma?
Yeah, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha.
Moksha. So these are the four Purusharthas for us: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. And in that, Dharma, Artha, and Kama are temporary, which is what we are all doing in samsara: Dharma, Artha, and Kama. But Veda Vyasa has said there is this fourth category called Moksha, which should be the highest goal of human life. So if we want to be staying in the first three, that's fine. We can be Nitya Samsarins and going on. But Veda Vyasa, our founding father, says Purushartho Uttamaha. So that is what he says in Brahma Sutra, that this moksha is the highest of Purushartha. So for all of us, that is the samam bonum of Vedic philosophy. Vedic philosophy is what? Ihahi vivida samsarika dukkha darshanena viraktasya. As Jayatirtha said, what is that? When we are in this material world, we see the ups and downs of life, the pleasure and pains, the dualities of those kind of material existence we see, and that gives us suffering. So that is the first point. That is when we become mumukshus. And that is what Jayatirtha says, Ihahi vivida samsarika dukkha darshanena viraktasya. And then you do what? Samadhamadi mumukshoho adhikarinaha. So that is when we become adhikaris or mumukshus. So I think what we should all be trying to do here, I think we are already mumukshus. If we are not mumukshus, we are not going to be here doing these kind of Sunday contemplations of deepest levels of philosophies. We are actually talking about core Hindu philosophies here. We will not be doing that. So in that sense, I think we were mumukshus or adhikari. So we have to start somewhere. This is our starting point. Yeah. So I think moksha is the ultimate goal, and we all have to start somewhere. And to start somewhere, we should first become adhikaris. And the adhikaris are the ones who actually understand the transient nature of samsara. So once we have sincerely understood that, then the journey begins. The journey's destination is moksha. And what happens there? There are two problems there, and I was actually going to deal with that next week. So what are the problems? The folks who have gone to moksha are not going to come back and tell us this is how it is in moksha. Yeah, so that is not going to happen. We are currently not gone to moksha, so we don't know how it is. The folks who are in moksha are not going to come back and tell us. So how do we learn about what happens in the moksha? So we will have to go with what the revealed scriptures are describing about that. And that is what Yama is going to be telling us. But you're also right in the sense that it's individual experiences. So we make our experiment, we go to moksha, and when you are there, you will experience your own moksha. That is for sure, because that is what the revealed scriptures has said. Okay, so I'm hoping that over the next 2 or 3 sessions we will be able to tackle this concept of moksha in all its glory and in all its dimensions.
Namaskar.
I hope
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Madhu, for it to be experienced, you said, for it to be experienced, we have to be in the waking stage, isn't it?
Sorry, Shilaji, can you come back again?
No, you said once you reach moksha, you can experience it. So to experience something, we have to be in the waking state. Is it true?
So waking state. So that is interesting. What is that waking state? The waking state for us. So so that waking state, Shilaji, about the Jagrati Avastha, Swapna Avastha, and Sushupti Avastha only works for jivas in the material plane. Once you have reached moksha, you go to the Thuria state. Yeah, in the Thuria state of consciousness, when your inner eye is opened and then you are in that state, you will actually be experiencing your own nature and also the nature of the Brahman. So that is the Thuria state, which is not the wakeful state of the material existence. So
in the Thuria state, will we be experiencing all the other three states? All in
the prajna state,
all the three states are in Thuria state, isn't it?
so all the three states are in Thuria state. I'm not getting how you explain that. Thuria state is Thuria by definition. Thuria means four. Yeah, it's literally Thuria means four. So the Mandukya Upanishad, for example, does not give a name, whereas it has given Vishwa, Tejasa, Prajna. And then in the Thuria, it just says fourth stage. It doesn't explain the fourth state, what that fourth state is, and it gives only negatives of the fourth state. If you go to the Mandukya Upanishad sessions that we did, and it makes it very clear that the Upanishad will say there, I can only tell you what it is not. Na antaha prajnam, na bahihi prajnam, na ubayataha prajnam, na prajnam, na aprajnam, prapancha upashamam, shivam advaitam. So those are all the words that Mandukya Upanishad talks about. So that experience, you're right in the sense you are in an eternal wakeful state. But that wakeful state does not require your bahya indriyas, such as your eyes and so on. That involves your own internal indriyas, that is the jiva swarupa itself. So in that sense, you're awake all the time. Yes.
Yes, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, shall we close today's session? Harish, do you want to take us through Omkara recitation, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next Sunday for the third Vara's discussion of Yama. Take care and stay safe. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.